What is up, guys? Welcome back to yet another Man God Splaining Mushoku Tensei, a series of videos where I scour the internet to find the worst takes on Mushoku Tensei anime series and give my perspective as a longtime fan and, yes, light novel reader to either explain some of the bad takes they have or for us in general to kind of just laugh at these individuals, as many people have told me that this is sort of a therapy for them to actually watch my videos on reading people's feedback. With all that said, yes, last week we finally completed what I call the Mushoku Tensei Karen series, and we're going to move on to new stuff. As per usual, I'm not here to blast the person's name, put them out there for everybody to hunt them down. Again, it's just really kind of just an informative video while at the same time us having a little bit of fun at the same time. So let's dive right back into the fray. This particular reviewer opens it up with, "Screw it, I'd rather be a scumbag than have regrets. This one quote is but a symptom of Mushoku Tensei's true colors, a poorly conceived and erratically focused power fantasy masquerading as some greater isekai story." Great start, right? According to you, by the way, this is a review of Season 2, Part 2 specifically. I figured that's going to be where some really juicy bits are. Plus, I'm a little bit tired of hearing somebody complain about Rudeus touching Edis. Mushoku Tensei's anime has been praised by many fans for different reasons. Its world building, its down-to-earth writing, its music composition, wonderful visuals, and its characters. Yeah, I would say yes, quite a few people love the world building. I love the world building. I would agree with a lot of people that I think the biggest thing for Mushoku Tensei is characters. Characters. My gosh, I love the characters. Now, I will say, unfortunately, for the anime adaptation, they do kind of condense a lot of the character building. I mean, I was always mentioning the idea that Elanis's segments on the Beggar Continent would have been really great to have there. Character-specific chapters, them skipping that really does suck. I mean, the whole thing around Edis, why she left Rudeus, Sarah's perspective, skip that whole thing. It does suck. Wonderful visuals. Second season part 2 did pick it back up, but yes, I don't think we're ever going to have season 1 visuals ever again. That was where it was really at. Music composition is still really incredible. Down to earth writing for sure. But yeah, I'll agree with all these. Most notably, you'll even hear defenses for the series. Here we go. We're already getting into this. Just like the last poster, it's like there's this emphasis on you defend everything because you accept how bad he is. It's an anime about a flawed man overcoming faults and achieving redemption. No, we're already doing this. No. I think this is going to be like a new slogan for this series of videos. It's not a redemption story. And I'm curious if there's anybody that actually is really dead set on that idea of it being a redemption story. Again, it could change after what I've read, Volume 22. I just don't feel like this is a redemption story. This is a go forward. It's not about the past. It is about the past, but it is always about forward thinking. Achieving redemption in a different world. And again, because I don't think it's a redemption in a different world because he's not seeking to undo what he did. Rudeus, a creepy degenerate, is not perfect for a reason. I don't know if I agree with this statement. And this is like one of those moments where I'm kind of curious of what everybody thinks, and you can let me know in the comments down below or hit me up on the Discord. I don't necessarily think it's creepy for a reason. It's more of a fact that that's just who he is. Yes, you could say that is on purpose, but I don't think it's not perfect for a reason, as if it's going out of its way to do it. That's the key thing. It's not going out of its way to do that. He's a creepy degenerate, yes. That's what he molded into after his trauma in his previous life, shutting himself up in his room and just seeking out things and being sort of mentally and emotionally and maturity-wise being stunted. He's not perfect. Nobody's perfect, actually. Let me make that perfectly clear. Nobody's perfect. And if you think somebody's perfect, or if you want a perfect character, you can write that and you can watch that, but nobody's perfect. And I think the reason why you're able to point out that he's not perfect is exactly why the series is so great, because it's willing to show it. It's willing to show those imperfections. However, it's been apparent to others that Mushoku Tensei isn't a well-built together isekai plot. Wrong. Wrong. I'm sorry. I'm supposed to say that's your opinion, bro. But rather a creepy, degenerate fantasy where the game is the game. Okay, On one end, I'm okay with saying that's fine. I'm okay with somebody seeing this as a degenerate fantasy and that you can embrace the dirtiness of it and go, hell yeah. But I think that's more of an aspect of relatability. Because again, this goes in that whole realm that I got pretty deep into in the last video. This idea of people not being willing to accept that they're perverts. People being unwilling to accept human nature. Not willing to accept lustful thoughts. Stuff like that. But yes, Rudeus is a degenerate, and there is a relatability and a comfort that people are going to get from seeing a person willing to vocalize in his thoughts how pervy he is. Yes, thinking about the idea of like, oh yeah, would love to bag my sister. That kind of thought process. Game is the game. I'm guessing you're going to get into this. I would assume this is more into the idea of if it's acceptable, like the idea of a harem. If it's acceptable there, why wouldn't you just dive in? Which again, sure. An unfortunately shallow world building with uninspiring depiction. I would argue that this is the fault of the adaptation because there is insane world building. Now, granted, where we're at right now in the story, there is some subplots building up, but a lot of the world building is unfortunately cut. Again, in this segment we're talking about here with part 2 of season 2, the Beggar Continent. There is so much detail in the Beggar Continent, but what happened? They skipped it all. They didn't get into the Warriors of the Desert. They didn't get into the labyrinths and how they're built there. It didn't get much into the idea of how the teleportation labyrinth was conceived. There's so much world building that it, unfortunately, for the sake of the runtime of the anime, they're skipping. But Mushoku Tensei, in general, it has insanely well developed world. So much life breathed in that world. Plot contrivances to give Rudeus perfect opportunities without much challenge. Sure, okay. The Hydra wasn't a challenge? They lost somebody and they nearly died several times. That was a massive challenge. And the fact that he wasn't able to perfectly take down the Hydra and lost somebody important to himself is a sign that that was a challenge. There's tons of challenges here. But I guess the question is, what challenges are you looking for? Are you looking for challenges in relationships? Yeah, he has lots of challenges there. He couldn't get it up for the longest time, thus he couldn't have relationships because he felt like he was not a man and he was afraid of getting close to people and getting close to female possible partners because he was afraid not working. There's tons of challenges that's happening in this story. And a questionable depiction of personal agency, especially surrounding women. And oh my gosh, here we go. Here we go. Agency for female characters. To compensate for the MC, I hope he gets into this in detail, because if we're going to leave it to vagueness, I can't really argue what exactly he's talking about. Again, you can argue the Sylphie comment. That's like the last person said, is a doormat. Sylphie is a doormat. That kind of mentality of the idea of them not having agency. Again, that is to Sylphie, specifically her character. She seems like she doesn't have agency and she's very passive because that's what she's developed. It's not a healthy thing technically for a lot of people, but that's how she developed because Rudeus was everything to her. Saved her life from bullies and having a miserable life in her home village. And then when she got transported to an unknown location, everything that he taught her was the reason that she survived. It builds this idea of somebody being on a pedestal and thus they want to give them everything. It's wrote that way on purpose. It's not feeding a fantasy. Yeah, it's obviously feeding a fantasy, but at the same time, it's purposeful. There's purpose behind that writing. You just don't want to see it, obviously. Most people don't. Children, I'm guessing we're talking about, I don't know, Aisha? Again, Aisha is an insanely well-wrote character. It's not there yet. It's still developing. By the way, We're barely 12 volumes into 26 volumes. There's plenty of space here for characters to do more things. To compensate for the MC being a leech. An MC being a leech? Leeching like success or something? And the second coming of, oh my gosh. Really? Really? He's, what, making an island full of young kids? No! Other people are that much degenerate and stupid, if not even more. To compensate for the MC being a leech and the second coming of this, other people are that much degenerate and stupid, if not even more. Like the other characters? Or are you talking about people that defend it? What are you talking about? Perversion is everywhere. SA is measly off-commentary remark, and degeneracy is the norm. Okay, so we're talking about the story. Perversion is everywhere. In the second season, part 2, not really. Not as bad. SA is measly off-comment remark. Yeah, you can argue that, but it's not really so much a thing in that world. Not that it makes the act of doing that okay. Again, not excusing the act of doing that. But you do have to acknowledge that it's not really like in that world you have much cases of somebody being taken to court for it. Like the whole thing with Lenny and Presena. It's not like he's going to get taken to Beastfolk court over it. Again, not to say it's right. And again, I argued with that whole situation. It kind of sucks that he did that without acknowledging that he did to them what was done to him in his previous life. But again, hypocrisy isn't usually acknowledged unless somebody points it out. And degeneracy is the norm. Technically, yes. In a society that's obviously kind of more geared towards that time period and whatnot and those moralities, yes, obviously. Fans will say, if you don't like it, don't watch it. I don't like this comment. I've said this comment before, so don't get me wrong. I'm not being like dumb here about this. I don't like this comment. My argument more is if it bugs you that much, then why are you watching it? Like if it upsets you, if it hurts your feelings, if you think that it's morally wrong and that it bugs you, why watch it? That's my argument most of the time. But that's missing the point. Any piece of media can/will be received and responded to by audiences. That has nothing to do with this comment. This has nothing to do with this. This, you're saying people will watch it and they will respond to it. But this is basically, if it hurts you, stop. Like, move on. Some viewers will go into further works they don't necessarily like with an open mind. Yeah, that's good. There's a reason media can shift expectations. Media can challenge your views, and that's why media is powerful. Yeah. So how does this season fare with previous iterations? Even worse. So I guess what you're saying here is that you can expect, as this writer it has an open mind, they're going into this with an open mind, hoping that it will change their mind. I don't think you're watching this for the right reasons. If you're wanting it to change your mind, you're going into the wrong reasons. You're expecting it's going to mold itself to change your mind. You're expecting it to change, and thus you'll accept it. Which is sad that Refugien has stated what he has stated, because he's trying to kind of shift things a little bit to make it a little bit more easier for people to touch. But it's not going to be acceptable by people like this. We mentioned that with the previous one. That Karen basically, after the change with Roxy, pulling Rudeus on the bed rather than him pulling her that was in the novel, and it's expected that that was changed in order for it to be more acceptable, that person still didn't accept it. And I'm going to guess that this person didn't either. Anyways, how does season fare? Even worse. Not only does it fail to challenge your views, but it also fails to write cohesive set situations that can only be excused with "it's a fantasy." Okay, this is a loaded sentence here. Not only does it fail to challenge your views, what is your expectation of challenging views? I don't see challenge down here, so I'm going to guess you're not actually going to fully get into this. If you're meaning challenge your view as in you didn't like the show before and you're hoping that it will challenge your view on that and do better for you, no, I don't expect that, because Refugien's going to keep it consistent with the story flow that he wants. He's not going to challenge your view on that by fixing it and making it okay for you. If you're going based on the idea of challenge your views as in your moralities and how you feel about things, no, because it's a story. You can look at the story and you can set your expectations and criticize what choices the characters make, but you shouldn't ever expect, similar like I told before with the previous ones, don't expect Mushoku Tensei to tell you how to think. That's a problem a lot of people have. It needs to say something about this. It needs to say something about forced servitude. No, it's supposed to tell you a story, and you can choose to like it or not like it, or like the decisions the characters make, but never expect for it to tell you what to think. Now, a sort of aside, I will admit that there is one thing that I think that Mushoku Tensei does challenge, and I don't think it's intentional. Now, it could be technically intentional by Refugin because, again, he stated before that, yes, if there's somebody like Rudeus around you in your life and they're looking to change themselves, I would hope that you don't turn your back on them. I almost think sometimes, just based on reading feedback over the course of my covering Mushoku Tensei, I do really feel like, again, intentional or not, Mushoku Tensei is the best story to challenge empathy. I think Mushoku Tensei is overall a challenge of empathy because Refugin is great at writing characters that are flawed, dirty, do bad things, do questionable things, but still at some point face a hardship. And there is almost an aspect of challenging one's empathy that you would empathize with them. When somebody does something horrible, and again, in a lot of cases, inexcusable, and again, I won't excuse it, can you still empathize with them when they're at their worst? When they're in pain, when they're away from that decision and they're in pain, will you empathize with them? Even when they're in the act of doing a bad deed, will you still hurt for them? For me, when Rudeus again broke his promise with Sylphie and slept with Roxy, I was upset at him for breaking his promise. But at the same time, I was still empathizing him for his loss of his father, with the idea of loss. I could still do that because, again, it was real. It felt real. It felt impactful to me. So again, I challenge people on this question. Do you think Mushoku Tensei is a challenge of empathy? Because I think that's more than challenging thoughts, challenging viewpoints. Because again, it just shows it. And you can question it. And I've always loved that aspect about Mushoku Tensei because it does things that are questionable. Because Refugin has no filters and things just exist in the world, you're allowed to think about it. Again, the existence of forced servitude. Going out there and getting Julie. Again, it's wrong. And again, I argued for a lot of people. You like to stand on your soapbox and say how bad Rudeus is for being in that world when that exists and not nuking down the entire thing. It exists in your world right now. What are you doing? It exists in this world, and Refugin's not afraid of having it exist, and even having Rudeus mingle around it for the sake of acknowledging that it exists. And you should never forget that forced servitude exists. And again, exists in your world. But it also fails to write cohesive situations that can only be excused with it's a fantasy. You're going to have to explain that one more as to what does that do? Where does that happen? Choices in writing and production fall apart. What? This anime season, especially the later half, is an egregious storytelling of rushed problems, incomprehensible developments, and poorly handled traumas before setting up a complete character assassination plotline for many of those loved ones. Again, I hope you're going to get into this in more detail because this is so broad and unexplained. I can't really argue anything of this. I mean, I can argue it because none of this is right, in my opinion. There's no egregious storytelling of rushed problems. You can probably say the whole situation with the later part where Rudeus is literally in a depressed state and Roxy comes in to help him out. Yes, there's a lot of that was a bit condensed, but it doesn't necessarily take from what the story was saying. He was really upset. He was traumatized by the loss of his father. And then Roxy came in, gave him a little vigor of energy by sleeping with him. Again, not to say it was right. And then after that, he explains why he's in trouble and what's hurting him, and she tells him a way of kind of stepping forward. He's not fixed. I hate this that I have to keep saying this. He's not fixed. This story never really has a moment where, boop, Rudeus is fixed. I know a lot of stories like to do that, and people love those stories, but this isn't that story. This is a story where he carries baggage. Rudeus carries baggage, like normal people. Incomprehensible developments, not sure what? Which ones? Poorly handled traumas, I would argue against that. But yeah, I can see that it's, again, because the condensed nature of it, you do miss a lot of the broader kind of swimming that Rudeus does in his head. And character assassination, I'm assuming he's going to talk about Rudeus and Roxy. Rudeus is controversial, to put it lightly. Apparently. That's why I made a whole video series on it now. You have heard enough about his issues from other negative reviews. However, the first half of part 2 continues his path to achieve the good life and grow. Growing into a family man and overcoming his past faults for others made some actually like Rudeus' character for a moment. Growing to a family man and overcoming his past faults. No, I don't. I mean, he overcomes his past faults in the idea that he gets over his ED, but that's not really a fault in his mindset in the story. which is saying something. Other characters get some good arcs, such as Norn and Paul. Thank you. At least this reviewer actually acknowledges some stories that are outside of Rudeus that are actually good. Sylphie is a character in the series Mushoku Tensei. Yet this is a person that doesn't like Sylphie, doesn't like the doormat aspect, doesn't like the idea of a female being fully dedicated to their man. They don't like that. There's a jealousy part of it. I think a lot of it is jealousy that people don't want to admit. But yes, there's the other side of it that she's passive. And I agree. That's a side that I can somewhat agree, but I understand why she's extremely passive. There's a difference. I don't like Sylphie's passiveness, personally. And I think that there is a massive danger there. But at the same time, I will acknowledge that there's a reason why she's passive. There's a story reason. Composition-wise, the music remains strong. And while animation quality has taken a bit of a decline, parts that need stellar animation, the episode 10 fight scene, episode 12 argument scene are on point. While many fans may complain about the drop in animation quality, directors still manage to create a show with component alignment. Voice actors remain giving their heart and soul to wonderful performances when the time comes for it. Agreed with pretty much everything. I do also agree with the idea that, and again, I said it before, I would love for it to have the love and care and time that season 1 had. I don't think it'll ever happen again. I think the director slash series composition slash scriptwriter, the guy who worked on everything for season 1, he did an amazing job. I wish that he could have stayed on the project, but obviously, according to him, it seems like he kind of pretty much mentioned, it was a lot of work and it was very taxing. However, all my praises end here. All right, let's get into it. Hoping this person gets a little bit more in detail about what he's talking about. I think that was kind of the nice thing, as much as I got to the point where I was sick of the previous poster. At least they were very detailed. This is a point specifically from light novel readers, not from me. The anime adaptation skips several conversations and chapters. Yep, now, it's not unfamiliar for anime to do this, to fit its restricted runtime, budget, and story points. It has to set constraints and cut material. This is just a symptom of making anime. As an anime-only fan, many sightings of the potential cuts become noticeable. Big developments are missing reactions from other characters, and arcs are rushed to set off new events. I'd be curious what you mean here. Big developments are missing reactions from other characters. What developments and which reactions are you looking for? Because again, I'm thinking, again, since this is on the page for Season 2, Part 2, you're talking about specifically that. Whose reactions are you looking for? Are you looking for reactions to maybe Zenith coming in and the reaction of like Geese and Elise and all them? Yes, because they had a bar scene. There is some, but I think that you might be expecting some from people that don't have reactions. And arcs are rushed to set off new events. Not really, it happened. Rudeus had a lot of time to breathe when he was up in the north, and then suddenly he gets a letter, and it's get up and go. That's why it's so jarring when you get to that point where, yeah, you get a turning point or something like that, and it says, get up and go. Like, he literally has to drop his life and go. That's why he struggled with the idea, do I leave? My wife's pregnant. Do I leave? Things come at you fast. An episode supposedly has a very important conversation cut, and its cut makes the act look even more reprehensible. We'll get to that moment later, I'm guessing the Roxy scene. Even as a solely anime watcher, you'll notice rushed developments without the needed downtime. However, before you say, y'all should just read the light novel already, to anime watchers, keep in mind, I don't like saying that. I do encourage people when they do say, man, this is great, the skip content videos that I do, holy crap, this is great. And I go, yeah, if you like that, go check it out. I don't necessarily like the idea of pushing people, you're not going to enjoy it, thus you should read the light novel. I will point out that when somebody has an issue with the story, there's context in light novel, and I'm going to point it out, but it's not necessarily to say you should read it. Keep in mind that these are my views of the anime's work, not the light novel. If you wish to discuss comparisons to the light novel or complain about specific scenes missing, discuss it in those forums. I've seen enough. This is why I hate anime-only fans. I don't like seeing it either, so I'm not going to argue with you there. Post during the series airing. Light novel readers are allowed to feel upset, but fans have got to stop plastering spoilers or attacking anime-only watchers just because of the disappointment surrounding the season. Be critical, not a... Again, my whole point here with your post is to explain things in case you want it. I don't care if you read the novel or not. However, this iteration is still a disappointment overall. Please get into details. please get into details. This entire post has been literally, I don't like it. I don't like it. And it's not just because adaptation no good. The first half is still, well, how would you know that? How would you know that? The first half is still actively uneventful, and good arcs become sparse in a slow-running lagoon. In the second half, the plot and the people surrounding the plot take a turn for the worse without proper development for such setups. The most egregious of these, the streets won't f with this one, has to involve Roxy. The hell are you, what? What are you saying here? Again, this is way too vague to really... I don't understand a review where you don't even want to get into why you're saying what you're saying. The first half is still actively uneventful. So everything around Nanahoshi and everything, none of that was eventful? Like, what are we watching the same freaking show here? Norm being shut in and feeling like she's inadequate compared to those around her? Everything around Aisha and her feeling like she's the redheaded stepchild? None of this stuff is eventful to you? You just want the dragon explosions? That's eventful? And good arcs become sparse in the slow-running lagoon. In the second half, the plot and the people surrounding the plot take a turn for worse. And again, this is about the Roxy thing. Do you like her characterization? Too bad. It becomes just as shallow as Rudeus' brain. So you don't like what they did with Roxy, I'm guessing. Because she slept with Rudeus, she's as shallow as Rudeus' brain. Many aspects of her goals along many years of living and her 7-year journey get nullified. And she becomes nothing more than another girl accompanying Rudeus, who she feels flustered by now that he's older. No, she's not flustered by Rudeus now that he's older. She's flustered by a man who's handsome that saved her life, and then realizes it's Rudeus. But she fell in love with Rudeus before even any of that happened. She actually had sort of a little bit of a crush on Paul. It's more really an idea that she loved Rudeus' family. Like, Rudeus' family was like an ideal family. A lot of characters get that. Sylphie had the same thing. Rudeus' family was kind of an ideal family. She talked about this back when her, Talhan, and Elise were traveling. She had this dream, this fairy tale in her mind that she would go down a dungeon at some point, run into this Prince Charming, and they would fight their way back to the surface. That was been her dream. She even actively went out and did dungeons over and over again in order to hope that she actually runs into that one person. And then Rudeus just happens to fill in that gap. And yes, when the moment he turned to her, she thought, oh my gosh, this guy is so handsome, my Prince Charming. Again, he puked because she didn't know it was him. It was a love at first sight moment, a random crush. But then yes, over time, she realized that he's really, handsome and he's just as talented as he used to be. That's what she fell in love with. And just because she falls in love with him doesn't mean that she has no value after that. So you're saying that any person that falls in love with somebody in the real world has no value after they fall in love with the person that they're in love with? Because even after that, she has a life. Like, it's not as if her entire life, the moment that she wants to get with Rudeus, it's over. Plot twist. Conveniently ignoring how Roxy is 50 and knew taught Rudeus when he was 5 years old. Yes, I know Megiddo A is from Roxy eventually 50. Let me joke and talk my shit again. She's no longer her own character with her own goals, but rather just another one of Rudeus' girls. Again, why is it so bad that she falls in love with Rudeus? This is what I'm not mentally getting what you're saying. Because she fell in love with Rudeus, she has no agency. You were mentioning that earlier, so I'm guessing this is what you're talking about. I thought you were talking about Sylphie. But I don't know why, just because she falls in love with Rudy, suddenly she has no agency. Suddenly she's not going to do anything in her life. Why? Why? It boggles my mind that you think just because she falls in love with Rudeus, and the story is following Rudeus, so thus she shows up on scene, she's probably going to be at his side or something like that. Why do you think she loses all agency the moment that she falls in love? That doesn't make any sense. You're making an assumption about her character based on, what, 2 episodes? That she was traveling with him? Did you want her to go to the store while they were traveling to the Beggar Continent? Okay, so they get to the pillar and they have to get to that other shelf point, and so they're all on that little platform that's going up, and you're expecting her to just kind of, I don't know, walk off and go see if she can find a succubus? They get home and they go to Rudeus' house and they have to explain the situation to Sylphie, and you expect her to, I don't know, go get a job at KFC instead? Like, what is your, based on 2 episodes of them getting together, what are you expecting her to do? I think you're making an assumption just to make some jab. This is like very surface level argument here. This is all haphazardly thrown together over a mere 20 minutes of anime runtime, and it's far more poorly developed than previous interests, especially on both ends. So you're talking specifically in the idea of her just falling in love. You think it's shallow. I don't understand what you're expecting. People fall in love all the time, and it's not as if it has to build over long periods of time, and it's not as if that love doesn't grow more over time. I don't understand what's the difficulty here. But it gets far worse. Through one specific plot line, several other plot points become rushed and ideas fall apart. Again, you gotta give me details here. Viewers will either defend this girl with their lives or despise everyone, including her, for the illogical turn of events. Nothing about it's illogical. As you can guess, I'm in the latter camp. You don't need a rage bait video to understand how some viewers, including some established fans, were upset by the later arc of Season 2, Part 2. To put it simply, it's a slap in the face of one's intelligence. Potential slight spoilers, not specific, but read ahead at your own risk. Episode 9 to 12, especially Episode 11, are a misaligned mess. Major plot events and aftermaths are ill-conceived, and so, please get specifics. You're going to see... You have to explain why you're saying this. Merely situational for the sake of being situational. Such events that should be utterly story-shaking are moved on from quickly and become nothing more than devices for misplaced subplots that don't have enough development to be feasible. Did you just, I don't know, look up a negative review and just take out names and places and the title of the story and just paste it in here as saying bad because a bunch of things with no label? And the big dilemma loses the plot as it doesn't know where its lead should focus. Events are illogical. It makes characters, especially Roxy, look like utterly disgusting in context. Again, to explain to this individual if they're watching this, my assumption is that you don't like that Roxy slept with him. When in actuality, the context here is that in that world, they don't have your moral objections here that she shouldn't sleep with him because... people should only have one female partner. Yes, Rudeus sleeping with her even after he promised Sylphie is a bad thing. It bothered me too. But from the perspective of Roxy, she's coming to a situation in a world that everybody that is a noble, whatever, has a harem. Nobody's against the idea of a harem except for Millis. And so she doesn't even think there's anything wrong with it. She's hanging around Elise all the time who's sleeping with tons of men who's probably have partners of their own. Well, technically she does avoid whenever they do have partners. But anyways, this isn't a morally objectable thing here for her to do. Plus she was told, and again, this is not in the anime, so I fully understand this. Elise implied with the conversation with Geese that that was the only way to really kind of pull him out of this rut because he's going to die within a week. The idea was that sleeping with a male will give that spark to you and bring that life back into you. And after that point, she can talk to him and get through to his head. She tried some other things before she did anything like that, but ultimately came to that decision, or at least that choice by the two of them. People wouldn't defend those involved while criticizing past characters in these current events. We're portrayed in the story as more of attractive art. What? This Dilemma Act also ends up being completely undermined big story-shaking events in previous episodes, as the dilemma is the means for resolution. I'm guessing what you're saying here is that by Rudeus sleeping with Roxy, it undermines previous issues like the fact that Paul died and the fact that Zenith is in the state that she is in and everything that happened in that dungeon. I'm guessing that's what you mean. It's what triggers it. And again, you're assuming based on the last two episodes that he gets away from that. No, this is something that haunts him. It stays with him. Damn it. What did I do that for? Maybe I shouldn't have gone. Maybe Paul would be alive. Maybe I made a mistake there. All those things still in his head. Those effects are nothing more than a mere afterthought in the heat of something degenerate. He's not happy with it. But don't worry. Just like the previous seasons, the anime's moral system will try to validate its degeneracy once again. This time around, though, the anime becomes just as hypocritical as Rudeus. Do you know how the other girls called out other guys for specific perversions in Season 1 while not factoring in different religious beliefs? Don't worry, your fictional waifu will accept your perversions. What? This time around, the anime becomes just as hypocritical as Rudeus. Do you know how other girls called out other guys for specific perversions in Season 1? Are you talking about people talking about maybe like harems and whatnot? Or like how Roxy didn't like Elise in bed with a bunch of men? Are you equating Roxy walking in on Elise with a bunch of guys and her blasting them out the window and being upset about the whole situation? She was embarrassed. Roxy was embarrassed. She's never seen anything like that before. It embarrassed her. Freaked her out. It wasn't that she's against it. It's not like she disowned Elise and ran away from her. That's just Roxy being embarrassed by the situation. She's inexperienced. Thus, she's flustered by it. It's not that it's an inconsistency in the writing. Millis is the only people that are against harems. Plain and simple. Yes, there's individuals that will be against it, but in general, the only people that are going to say, how dare you, you're wrong for doing that, is Millis. Don't worry, your fictional wife will accept your perversions. Again, we're going to get into the Sylphie thing. She's always accepted this. She told Rudeus it's okay. She's always accepted this. She opened the door to it. She literally said, Rudeus, go out and find somebody right now, without saying it. Rather than tackle these problems head on, others will actively reward and excuse your actions when others in the past have been vindicated. Again, I don't know what you're talking about with the past thing. Again, to explain to this individual, and I'm sorry for those that are... This is going to be an ongoing thing, by the way. Every time people watch these mansplaining, I'm going to repeat some things because I have to explain to the individuals. Again, Sylphie said from the very beginning she's okay with it. It was in regards to the fact that Rudeus wanted a child. He wanted a trophy to say that he birthed a child with Sylphie. As bad as that is Rudeus' character, and I said the same thing with that whole thing. That's really bad reason to get somebody pregnant is because you want a trophy to say that you slept with somebody. It changes, obviously. Eventually, he realizes that that child is something special. You've seen it in the anime. He literally cries because he sees a child in his hands now. It's no longer a trophy. It's a child. I created a life. That's changing for a person. But back then, when he wanted a child, she badly wanted to give it to him because Sylphie's mindset is, I just want Rudeus happy. I love Rudeus that much. He means everything to me. I want to be happy. If he wants a child, elves take a bit. It's very difficult. So she told him, if you want to bring in somebody to have a child, please do so. She was open to it. Why? Because Paul did the same thing, had another woman. Again, harems are open in this world. The only people against it are way down the south in Millis. She has no problem with him having multiple wives. The only thing that she has ever said about wives is just bring them to me so I can make sure they love you and I'll accept them. That's the only thing that she's ever wanted. The only person that was upset about the situation was Rudeus, because he made a promise he wouldn't cheat on Sylphie. The only person in this entire situation that was against it was Rudeus. He made a promise. Roxy's a little uncomfortable with that because she's afraid that Rudeus is going to lose his wife, because he's really upset about it. This is a really bad situation. But guess what? Sylphie never agreed to that promise that Rudeus made that he won't have another woman. Sylphie has always known it's going to happen, and Sylphie was always open to it. That's what people don't get. They're thinking from a mindset of this world, and thus they're upset about it. And that's fine. It's fine that you're upset about it. Again, I said, when I read it initially, I was upset at Rudeus because he broke his promise. Not that I'm against Sylphie accepting it, not that I think Roxy's bad, not that I think the world itself is bad. It's just that me personally, I felt that way. But that doesn't mean it can't exist in a storytelling. You're writing this as if it's a fault in the writing. No, everything has been explained up until this point. You just don't like it. And again, that's fine that you don't like it, but it doesn't mean it shouldn't exist in the story, and it doesn't mean that it's bad writing, because it's explained this throughout the entire series what is happening here. One who vocally hated a character for their past acts of degeneracy will actually rationalize the consequences of that character's actions if you're factored in. You really should put names in here. I know that you're probably trying to be vague for the sake of a review, and I guess this is kind of a fault for using the site that I'm using, but Rudeus's act of degeneracy? What does it have to do with the act of sleeping with him in a consensual relationship and everything after? I don't understand that. Are you talking about Sylphie, who's said things about him being degenerate and she's rationalizing it now? Again, everything is explained, and these are completely different situations here. This MC's previous sense of morality, invalid. Their original efforts to grow family-wise, pointless. Morals are different here. Let's just conveniently ignore how other characters were previously hounded for their lack of morality from the multiple angles, season 1 for instance, not just from one party's religion, and how this entire subplot still... Oh, you're talking about Ellen Lace. Okay, you're talking about Ellen Lace. Again, this is the problem with you being very vague about what you're talking about here. You're talking about Ellen Lace this entire time? Yes, because Ellen Lace is the perfect person to talk about this. I actually loved this in the light novel. I thought it was like one of the greatest lines of this segment. Rudeus says, you want me to marry Roxy? You're Sylphie's grandmother. How could you even tell me to have another wife when that's your granddaughter? Ellen Lace said, I am the perfect person to say it's okay. I am the only person that can talk on this because Roxy is my best friend. Sylphie is my granddaughter. I know more than anybody that you can make them both happy. I don't want Roxy to be this upset and sad and destroyed. She's destroyed right now. She wanted both these girls that are so important to her to be happy. And you're saying just because of Ellen Lace's curse and sleeping with other people that she has no moral sense to say anything? Is that what you're saying? The one who vocally hated a character for their past acts of degeneracy will actually rationalize the consequences of the character. Yeah, you need to put name. This is going to be a big problem with this, but hopefully that's answering your question there because I can't get a sense of who you're talking about when. Holy crap, is this going to be a two-parter just for this one person? Interesting debates and controversial views, especially those surrounding certain relationships, become nullified by a rush of flow, a lack of upfront communication between characters, and active inconsistencies with tone. This dilemma isn't bad because it's controversial. Controversial media can challenge one's worldviews on morals. No, it's not trying to do that. It's in there. And it's not saying something. Just because Rudeus slept with Roxy does not mean it's Refugin saying, sleep with somebody else, people. It's just something that happened in the world. Are you literally watching the show hoping it will tell you to act a different way? Please stop watching media. If everything you watch you're hoping for them to tell you how to think, stop watching television. Stop reading stories. Why do people so badly want stories to tell them how to think? Oh, it's so mind-boggling. It can set up believable scenarios with understandable roots where the moral police has to see different perspective. No, Refugin never asked that. He is hoping that if you know somebody like Rudeus who's trying to do better, then that you would accept them. That's a key point there. The fact that many fans can still see Paul as a well-written character, not person, is proof of this idea. Unfortunately, it fails to be well put together controversial with consistent challenges. Then it becomes nothing more than wish fulfillment. There is a sense of wish fulfillment there, yes, because anybody that can relate to Rudeus that has had it rough in their previous life, the idea is that, oh, wow, I can go to another world and things can still happen. It's the idea of always something forward. That's what makes it entertaining. The entertaining aspect is that fulfillment. Mushoku Tensei rushes so hard into creating and indulging in the dilemma to get its way. This doesn't help with an utter inconsistency when addressing the subject and an unfortunate degradation of characters along the way. It can't even challenge itself without portraying those challenging its ideas as guilty or insensitive as possible. The hell did you just say there? Again, I'm assuming what you're talking about here is that you feel like because of the character choices and mistakes, acknowledged mistakes, are characters being degraded. So every time a character has flaws, it's poor writing or it's degrading the character. No. Because a character falls in love does not mean they're degraded. Just because a character falls in love does not mean they're less than what they used to be. Just because a character makes a mistake doesn't mean they're lacking any sort of personality, writing, or it's just all for convenience. I don't know where you're getting this mindset, and it sucks that you don't name characters or specific plot points. You're being overly descriptive to explain yourself and not be spoilery, but you're losing any sort of context by avoiding words and plot points. So you're spoiling it, but you're not spoiling it. Treat it like cake, not like other cakes. It's gonna be sold and promoted for its unique style, but it'll still be criticized regarding a correct mix of ingredients and cooking time. The hell are you talking about? The cake? I know what you're talking about, but this is a really stupid analogy. The cake being poorly made is validated by the differences or challenge. You can gas it up like the store-bought, blah, blah, blah. This is really stupid, dude. You're basically saying that people are talking it up, but it's terrible. It's still an inspiring male fantasy masquerading under a big isekai story. That's just your opinion, bro. It's literally one of the most best-selling isekais out there, but yeah, sure. Fluff yourself as knowing more than everybody else. I like that idea of people, like, trying to make other people think that they're stupid for thinking that it's great. It's so pompous. Like, can you shut up? It's so pompous. Shut up. Rudeus having the cake and eating it too is pretty effective way to negate any sort of past efforts he made. I thought you were talking about this story, and now you're talking about... What the hell are you talking about anymore? But it's not supposed to make sense. It's supposed to be fantasy for neats. Okay? I know... I barely know any neats that enjoy the story, but apparently it's a fantasy for neats? Sure. I mean, there's a relatability for those that have been stuck in that situation, or yes, they possibly are in that situation, but it's wrote for everybody, and there's going to be a lot of people that will relate to it, yes. Rudeus is their self-insert. He's amazing AF, and the waifus run a faucet for him. This season makes it very clear of that. I better see a harem tag on season 3. Okay. We're done with the slightly spoilers, so now we're back to being even more obscure about what we're talking about because we don't want to actually explain ourselves. I've never been able to favor Mushoku Tensei. However, I've continued this series with an open mind like a critic should. Despite having vast issues with its flaws, many developments to the previous iterations left me intrigued. The series does have good moments, especially production-wise. I have to give so much credit to directors, voice actors, animators, and composers. Of course, I have to respect Refugion's original hard work. However, the season's final developments, not just with Rudeus' parents, but also with Roxy and Sylphie, become an insult to everything that has teased before. Wait, this is a new one, and apparently I missed it with your being very, very obscure here. I got the fact that you don't like Roxy falling in love, because apparently females are not allowed to fall in love, and apparently when they fall in love, even though they still have their own lives and their own personality, this person, based on a couple episodes, believes that Roxy is 100% devoted to Rudeus and doesn't have any sort of agency whatsoever. Sylphie, again, we've already established she's a doormat, apparently, and she has no agency herself because she has chosen to devote herself to Rudeus and is accepting of his relationship with Roxy. Again, we've got those two saddled. What? Wait, what? This season's final developments, not just with Rudeus' parents, become an insult to everything that was teased before about Rudeus' growth. What are you talking about here? It becomes an insult to everything teased before about Rudeus' growth. Are you talking about it's an insult to the idea of Rudeus growing to like his parents? Again, this is a stupid obscurity of this. But what about Rudeus' parents? Again, Paul and Zenith right here is an insult. Their stories are incredible. Unless you're one of those types that think that Zenith right now is basically fridged and thus made in the state that she is for the sake of story driving points. But I don't know. Paul's story was incredible. Zenith's story was incredible. It will continue to be a wish fulfillment degeneracy. Rudeus is still that pest fans will either support or desire to ram into a wall. Yeah, you cover both spectrums good there. I've had friends say to me that the degenerative aspects that I despise were all en route for an interesting redemption story. Your friends were wrong. Your friends lied to you. Again, here it is. Mushoku Tensei is not a redemption story. I gotta make that slogan. With great plot development and intriguing world building. But then, after so many attempts and compromises Rudeus made to grow as a person, he drops this line. Screw it. I'd rather be a scumbag than have regrets. It is, and will always be, just an idealized male fantasy other critics perceived it to be. Here's an interesting thing right here. Okay, again, your friends are wrong. It's not a redemption story. Yes, it does have great plot developments. It's just, I'm assuming that you don't like them. I'm assuming you don't like the world building. Again, you said nothing about the aspects of Danahoshi, the whole aspects with Norn, the whole aspects of the teleportation labyrinth, Rudeus' journey, the question marks and intrigue built around Zenith and her being put into the teleportation labyrinth itself. There's a lot of intrigue right now, but I'm guessing you're kind of ignoring all that stuff. Everything around that for the sake of pushing the argument that it is boring. I get that a lot. Don't get me wrong. I get that a lot. I do think that a lot of people, when they get in that mind frame of trying to bash something, they ignore anything that was actually positive. But then, after so many attempts and compromises Rudeus made to grow as a person, he drops this line. Screw it. I'd rather be a scumbag than have regrets. So, what you're saying is that when somebody goes on a positive path, when somebody starts to do good, they're not allowed to ever do wrong again. No. Incorrect. I have yet to ever see a single story where a character only makes a single mistake. And even in your fluffiest, dumb power fantasy isekais, they still make multiple mistakes. But the idea here is that if you think somebody, when they try to do good or they're going on a good path, which again, Rudeus is not actually consciously choosing, I want to be a better person, and that's the problem that you're probably facing there. Rudeus is never thinking consciously, I want to be a better person. He wants to do good things, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that he likes the feeling of it. Having a family and everything was something that he's like, wow, I've never tried this before, let me try it. And then he goes, I like this. It's never in his mind that he wants to be a do-gooder. It's never in his mind that he wants to do good. And even when it comes to the whole situation with, like, Julie, yes, he feels wrong at the idea of mistreating Julie. But that's just sort of an innate feeling that he has. But it's not necessarily that he's in his mind going, that's right, in my previous world, forced servitude was bad. I better not do bad forced servitude. No, he actively wants to help and take care of Julie. Actively. He's choosing that. Not that the life before him said morally right or wrong, just that he chooses in the moment to do that. But still, if you expect somebody who's doing good to never do bad again, or to have a character who will only make one mistake, you're watching and reading the wrong thing. Rudeus will continuously do wrong things. He will continuously make choices. And even still, this is a sign that Fujian's not going to hide away from having him have an unpleasant line like this. I'd rather have a story where a protagonist says this than a story where they go, hi, welcome to the world of flowers and rainbows. Here's our protagonist, Mr. Do-Gooder, who will protect the world and undo all the bad in the world. It's a fluffy world. There is no bad here. Come on in. It's comfortable here. It is and will always be just an idealized male fantasy other critics perceive it to be. Nope, it's not. A hikikomori, family leech, and literal reincarnated into a poorly built fantasy world, getting all types of looks, powers, benefits, and girl companions for free. Nope. Okay, well, let's go here. Yes, he is a hikikomori. He was a family leech. A literal, yeah, he did some of that stuff in his previous life. It's not a poorly built fantasy world. It's probably one of the best built fantasy worlds that I've ever read. We're not quite into that stuff yet, so guess we'll wait. I mean, you get a little bit of taste of it in Turning Point 2. Getting all types of looks. I don't know what that means. Powers, sure. Benefits, not sure what that means. And girl companions for free. No, he had to kind of do everything he could in order to get them. So, but we're jealous, right? Any sort of roadblock or tragic event is quickly moved on from, and nothing but a directive to set up another otaku fantasy. This is something I got from the last poster, similar to here, so hopefully I'm not kind of just copy-pasting what they're saying here. I think people believe that Rudeus gets over things, and he doesn't actually get over things. Again, we started off second season with him being broken because Edis left in the middle of the night, and he was unable to function for like half of a core. You have the fact that still, even to this point, if a group of people in a room all look at him with some sort of judgment, he suddenly has PTSD when he was in school in his previous life. He speaks overly formal with people despite the fact they find it creepy because he's afraid of rocking the wrong boat. He cowers in fear at Goliath grabbing him and pulling him to be interrogated in the university campus because he's afraid he's going to get strung up on a gate again. Yes, a lot of things aren't punctuated in the anime adaptation, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist in the story. But all that stuff was portrayed in the anime adaptation, except for really getting into Rudeus' head when he's being dragged off by Goliath. You can see it in his eyes, it's just not said. in the character's mind. It's not vocalized by the seiyus. He has a panic attack when he sees Nanahoshi. He's starving himself to death over a course of a week because his father died. Why do you think he quickly moves on from this stuff? And even to this point, like I said, he still thinks about how he might have got his dad killed. He never gets over this stuff. Potentially interesting world building, takes a back state when needed. Well, that's because it's not important. I think that's another thing that a lot of people don't really seem to understand is the way that Refugien writes. He doesn't constantly try to hit you over the head with lore. It's not like when, you know, Rudeus goes to the university again, suddenly we're going to sit there and learn, like, everything there is to learn about the university, the current teacher that's at the front table. It doesn't constantly try to remind you what's happening in the world because why? Rudeus doesn't care. Everything typically horrible in real life is simply not that big of a deal in this world. So Rudeus can look better narratively as the characters look worse. I'm guessing right here you're saying because like things like forced servitude exist, because harems exist, it makes Rudeus look better? No, it doesn't. Women have no sense of agency in the presence of our master. He could be celebrated, put on a pedestal, and pranced around like he is a better person now than before. But that doesn't change that at his core, he will always be a degenerate pest. Now he's just a hypocritical one. This new world validates. All right. Rudeus is not celebrated for sleeping with Roxy. Sylphie in that room is not saying, good job, Rudeus, for sleeping with Roxy. Sylphie in that room is going, please don't leave me, Rudeus. Did you find a new woman? You're leaving me now? Because she knows Roxy's in love with Rudeus. She can see it in her eyes. Rudeus is in love with Roxy. Sylphie loves Rudeus. What's wrong here? Only Rudeus. He's beating himself up in his head. He's afraid Sylphie's going to be so mad at him. She's going to leave me. She's going to hate me forever. Sylphie's so special to me. Please don't let me lose Sylphie. In the end, Rudeus will forever be mad at himself for that. He gets plenty of self-hatred for himself for doing that. Sylphie, again, is not going to punish Rudeus because Sylphie never agreed to him only having one wife. He promised he wouldn't cheat on Sylphie, but she never accepted that promise. She said, bring somebody if you want. If it'll make you happy, bring them in. Let me see them. Roxy beats herself up because she feels like she could have broke something there. Realizing how bad Rudeus is in that moment and how guilty Rudeus is, she feels bad for that. She chooses to wait to marry him until Sylphie's had her child. Despite having solid art and animation, a wonderful music composition, sparse, solid characters, it has some of the best characters writing in any story, really, that I've ever experienced. But again, I do acknowledge that a lot of that is just not adapted. It's unfortunate. I'm not getting on to you for it. In moments that show something special underneath, Mushoku Tensei remains nothing more than uninspiring storytelling with trashy direction. Sure, bro. Whatever, dude. I think that really the problem here, and this is being serious, I think just the story it's telling is not something that either you don't empathize, you don't want to understand, you don't connect with, you don't relate to. Again, I'm not saying you have to relate to everything in Rudeus. I don't relate to the fact that he touched Eris in the first season at all. I don't relate with what he was looking at before he got isekai. But I can empathize with a lot of things that he's going through, and I think you're not really getting that relation, empathy, or you're just not caring. Again, that's just my opinion. And that's just your opinion, bro. Many plot points and character situations remain actively unexplored or rushed. Well, this right here. Many plot points and character situations remain actively unexplored. Yet? I mean, do you know if it should be explored yet? I don't get that argument. If it's an ongoing series, why would you expect it to be explore everything? Let us take its time. Let it cook. Let Refugien cook. I will argue, and I've said this before, Refugien does not... Everything has a purpose with Refugien. If something seems convenient, if something seems rote, whatever, everything has a purpose with Refugien. Something that I really do love about his storytelling. Nothing is wasted, really. Good writing and world building are not a focus when the game is the game and you gotta catch them all, right? Perhaps I'm just tired, my disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined. What'd you like? blitz through it in one day. If I continue with the series, I'll probably fall into a state of trauma, and I doubt sex is the perfect means to make it better. Ah, ha, ha, good job at the end there. No, I actually like that last line. I really do like that last line because that tells me how much you're paying attention. Because the last poster did the same exact mistake. They thought sex fixed Rudeus. And I think if you believe that the sex fixed Rudeus in that scene, you weren't paying attention. And thus, it kind of invalidates a lot of the opinions that you seem to have, because it does kind of show that you're not paying attention. Rudeus wasn't fixed by sleeping with Roxy. None of that was implying that he was fixed by sleeping with Roxy. He was woken up by sleeping with Roxy. The idea here is that because he was in a state of not being receptive of anything, Roxy came in there as... Roxy, he adores Roxy. He worships Roxy. And even Roxy coming in that room, after everybody else has tried to talk to him, Roxy comes in that room, and guess what? The one that he worships, Roxy. Even in his mind in the light novel, he says, it's Roxy, but I'm still saying no. Roxy of anybody comes in that room, and he's declining her. Let's go out to go shopping. Roxy declines her. She's trying to connect with him and saying, I understand what you're going through. I've gone through something similar to that. This has happened to me. This has happened to me. I loved your family. Denied. Roxy, he's denying her. He is completely unreceptive. He's out of it. His eyes are sunken in. He's starving. He needs to eat something. He needs to drink something. He's going to die, probably within days. The idea is that sex invigorates you. It just spunks that life into you. It's actually a psychological thing. It spunks that life into you. And so when Rudeus did that with Roxy, granted in the light novel, it gets more into emphasis the idea that when she was hugging him, he smelt comfort. This is a smell that he's very familiar with because, again, he used to sniff her pantsu all the time. He was obsessed with her. In this moment of being in this state of depression, he could smell her. It's that familiarity, that comfort. I don't want to let that go. In the light novel, he literally pulls her back onto his lap. She was going to leave. Anime swapped it around, had Roxy pull him down and climb on top of him. He pulls her back down, lays her down after he says, it's fine if you want me. We can go find somebody else, though, if you want. That was a thing that woke him up, basically. It sparked life into him so that the next morning when he's going, crap, what the hell did I do? I can't believe I did that. Oh my gosh, why did I do that? Why did I do that? That was wrong. I promised Sylphie I wouldn't do that. But guess what? At that moment, he's thinking about Sylphie. He's thinking about life. He's thinking about tomorrow. It's getting his brain working again. The post in clarity, as people call it. Then what happens? He confides in Roxy what is going on. That was where he finds his resolve. Was talking to Roxy the next day. Hey, Roxy. Hypothetical. What if you ignored your family and then you lost them? And then you went to this other world and then you realized that you did lose them. What would you do? That's getting into the fix. That is him accepting what does he do going forward because he made massive mistakes. The sex didn't fix him. It was the conversation the next day that fixed him. And even still, he's not fixed. Anyways, his reviewer rating is 3. And that's this post. I think I want to kind of browse these posts a little better going forward because this was way too obscure about what he was talking about. And that could be on purpose to avoid people being able to criticize his comments, but I couldn't tell who he was talking about, when, what plot points he's talking about that are so bad. It's super vague. So I don't know. I think going forward for these ones, I need to start actually skimming a little more. I don't like skimming because then it spoils my thoughts on them, but anyways, I hope that there's still at least some good conversations in here. I hope you guys at least enjoyed this. I apologize for not looking into it more, but it is what it is. But anyways, until the next Man God Splaining Mushoku Tensei, if you liked this video, as always, make sure to hit that like button down below, comment. Let me know what you think of this one. At least it's less extremely aggravating as the Karen, Mushoku Tensei Karen, but it was kind of refreshing in that regard that we don't have somebody that's constantly yelling, he touched Edis, like 50 freaking times. Yes, we know. We all accept that. Again, we're not excusing it. But anyways, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe before you leave. I do Man God Explain Mushoku every single Sunday. I also do Mushoku Monday, where I'm covering the light novel series. So if you're into the light novels, still check that out. But I hope you guys enjoyed. And until the next Man God Explaining Mushoku Tensei, y'all take care.